Well, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event hosted by the R Street Institute to explore AI's role in enhancing cyber resilience. My name is Brandon Pugh, and I'm the director of R Street's Cybersecurity and Emerging Threats team. For those that are not familiar, the R Street Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy research organization. Our mission is to engage in policy research and outreach to promote free markets and limited effective government. A core focus of our team is examining the nexus between artificial intelligence, or AI, and cybersecurity. We believe AI can and has already been a benefit to cybersecurity, and that we should look to embrace its many applications to security, especially as malicious actors might seek to leverage it. As part of this research, R Street is leading a 15-member working group that meets monthly to explore this with members from academia, civil society, industry, and the Hill. Our sessions cover a wide variety of topics, from examining use cases to possible paths forward for policymakers. You'll meet 4 members today, and I encourage you to look at the written products available on the event page with more to come. I'm now happy to turn over the program to today's moderator, Amy Chang. Amy serves as a senior fellow on the team and has an impressive background spanning the military, the Hill, and industry. I'd also like to recognize the work of Heyman Wong, who's on the cyber team. Now I'll turn it over to Amy. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Brandon. All right, so with the amount of doomsday AI scenarios being floated around, I wouldn't be surprised if the noise drowns out some of the beneficial aspects of the technology. Despite this, though, AI has consistently demonstrated its potential as an enabler of enhanced analysis, speed, and scale in cybersecurity applications. We've written on this as well, and I'll have someone, which I think Luke just did right now, post our 2 recent articles, which we've published on the topic. Big shout out as well to Heyman Wong, who's been instrumental in our research efforts here. So we're going to spend some time today exploring some of the benefits that AI can bring to cybersecurity specifically, and how we see the technology advancing cybersecurity today and in the future. I'm joined by 3 brilliant panelists who will help unpack some of these issues. We have Charlie Snyder, Head of Security Policy at Google, Paul Lekas, Senior Vice President, Software and Information Industry Association, also known as SIIA, and then Olivia Trusty, a professional staff member on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'll give them each up to a minute to introduce themselves briefly before we dive in. Why don't we start with Charlie?
Well, hi there. As Amy said, my name is Charlie Snyder. First of all, thanks so much to R Street for hosting this important conversation, and as well as hosting the working group that's already producing great materials. As Amy said, I lead security policy at Google. I usually describe that as kind of my role is to help organize Google's security talent and tooling to help solve pressing kind of public policy challenges online related to safety and security.
All right, Paul.
Thank you. And thank you to R Street for hosting this and for convening the working group on AI and cyber. My name is Paul Lekas. I head public policy and government affairs at the Software and Information Industry Association. We work with around 375 companies on a range of public policy issues, but AI and cybersecurity are at the top of the list. There is a lot happening in these areas. And we try to help lawmakers and policymakers develop good policy that is well informed by research and will help to address social needs. Thank you.
All right, Olivia.
Hi, Olivia Trusty. I am on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I handle artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. I also want to echo my thanks to R Street for putting on this event and for putting together the working group. I'll say that AI, particularly with respect to national security, has been top of mind for so many members in the Senate, and most specifically on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And so ways to produce legislation on governance and responsible use and safety and ethics are all things that are being discussed. And I imagine that they'll be discussed throughout the year, especially as we put the NDAA together. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Well, let's jump straight into it. Drawing from your current roles, expertise, and background, how should we define AI in the context of cybersecurity? Which characteristics of AI and cybersecurity do you think are the most groundbreaking? I'll go to Charlie first.
Sure, thanks. So, at a fundamental level, I think we should just think about AI as technology, as software, really. And so all of the kind of existing, principles and characteristics of cybersecurity apply to AI just as it does to any other, networked technology. And for me, that means both we need to protect and secure AI using many of the same principles, processes, practices, et cetera, that we've learned through kind of decades of hard-won experience in the cybersecurity field. But AI as software can also be security software. And so AI has applications for cybersecurity to help cyber defenders. And in terms of characteristics that I think are the most groundbreaking, I mean, when we look at AI, we look at kind of four key characteristics that the technology has for kind of any given purpose. Its ability to reason, its ability to learn, the speed at which it can operate, and the scale at which it can operate. And for us, that presents both risks in terms of adversarial use of AI, but also huge benefits for cybersecurity. And kind of the thing that I think I'm most excited about is when we look at kind of the existing state of insecurity online. There's some chronic challenges that to me are really have complexity at the heart of them. Our digital ecosystem is very complex and growing more and more complex every single day. And AI's ability to help humans by rapidly and at scale learning from huge data sets and making sense of that complexity offers a lot of benefits for cybersecurity.
All right, Olivia.
Yeah, I really agree with what Charlie said. So in my job, I think about it, what's groundbreaking in terms of what's going to be helpful to the military, especially as we were thinking through recruitment challenges or readiness challenges. And with respect to cybersecurity in the military, I think AI can really be helpful in terms of more quickly identifying anomalies in systems or networks, detecting threats in advance, or patching vulnerabilities when we don't have the personnel to do that in person, or just mitigating cyber attacks in a timely way such that it gives us the decision advantage we need throughout cyberspace.
All right, Paul.
Well, I thought those were fabulous comments by both Charlie and Olivia, and I think to pick up on both what both of them said, AI and cyber can help to learn better, to speed, to scale, to echo what Charlie said, and that's really critical. And I think the lessons that Olivia points to about military readiness can also be applied to the private sector and to other types of organizations. One of the key issues we have in cybersecurity across the nation is a lack of personnel and a lack of training, despite there being a number of programs out there to really train people. And AI has the potential, and I don't think we fully realized it yet, to be able to cover that gap. And to help organizations of all sizes to be able to be more cyber ready, even if they don't have as many personnel in those jobs as they need. So I think the promise is really, really huge. But at the same time, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, there are also new cyber challenges that AI is presenting.
And now, so that we're in kind of like a race to maintain strategic cybersecurity advantages, and we have a lot of varied approaches to how, or just even thinking about how to approach AI development. And so, from your positions, what do you think is like the best approach for balancing between embracing AI's potential role in enhancing cyber resilience, as our panelists just mentioned, and safeguarding against any sort of associated risks that come up? I can go back. We can go backwards from Paul to back to Charlie.
Well, no, it's a great question, and I think that it's kind of a combination of two things. One of them is AI specific, and one of them looks at cyber itself. And as I'm sure the audience is well aware, AI and balancing the risks and the risks of AI to enhance the potential and the benefits has been a real focus in the United States internationally for the past at least few years, but in some places even longer than that. And I think that work needs to continue. I mean, I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of companies really taking the leading edge to try to advance AI that is responsible. And by that, I mean safe, secure, trustworthy. There's a continual challenge that companies are dealing with. And I think the government is really focused on this at the federal level and also increasingly at the state level. I'm really encouraged by the launch just today, of the NIST AI Safety Institute consortium, which brings together 200 organizations to look at exactly these sorts of issues and other issues around AI. I think, in terms of the cyber piece of this, that from my vantage of looking at public policy, there hasn't been as much focus on the intersection of AI and cybersecurity, and I think that's really critical because of all the advantages that AI can actually bring to cybersecurity and the need to be able to address adversarial attacks and things of that nature. So I hope that will continue.
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question, and it's an issue that Congress is actively debating. When I think about this through a national security lens, when we talk to Pentagon officials or officials in the intelligence community, what's clear to me is that adversaries are not likely going to operate or develop AI by the same rules that we do. And so it's important that whatever we do decide to do, it continues to promote and foster investment and innovation in the development of these technologies. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be focused on safeguards or guardrails to make sure the technology functions and operates the way that we want it to. But I do want to keep in mind that being competitive in this technology is going to be key. And I think one way of doing that is looking at existing laws on the books today and identifying what things actually would address some of these technologies and where there are gaps, and focus our attention on those gaps to help with the conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you opened with the word balance. It is a balance that we need to strike here. I think we need to first understand that AI or machine learning, whatever you want to call it, is already everywhere. And so efforts to try to limit the advance of these technologies, I think, kind of ignore that fact that AI is already operating behind the scenes almost everywhere, and don't really acknowledge that I think AI is going to be absolutely critical to keep up with the threat landscape. I think, as Olivia put it, attackers are not, they are not following the rules. They are already innovating with the technology. I think there's lots of really interesting research coming out about what the community is seeing. And so I think that makes it all the more vital that we create kind of approaches to governance that do manage risks, but ensure that organizations can benefit from the technology. And I'll give you a couple examples of policy areas where I think we really need to focus. So one example would be in terms of publicly available data sets. There's been policy proposals that would limit the ability of companies and model developers to use publicly available data sets. That will just create a situation where attackers, malicious actors, are able to use a resource that kind of rule-bound companies are not, and that's going to further kind of skew things in favor of attackers. Those types of policies, there may be good policy reasons for them, but I think we need to be really careful and make sure we're evaluating all the potential benefits and risks of things like that. At the same time, though, I think we do need to manage the risks from the technology, just not so much that it becomes impossible to adopt. And here I would say we've spent a lot of time, I think the community, governments, industry, civil society, talking about the safety risks. of AI and things that are maybe a little bit more in the future, non-proliferation or proliferation concerns around like chemical and biological weapons and things like that. At the same time, I don't think there's been enough focus on the cybersecurity risks and making sure that model developers are practicing just kind of basic good cyber hygiene. Because I do think we are actually seeing real world impacts where there's gaps currently, and I think that that's an area we need to focus as well.
Could I ask you, Charlie, to continue to talk about kind of some of the, you gave some great examples, but I wanted to hear if you had any other examples of AI being used in a cybersecurity context, whether it's for, threat detection, incident response, things like that. And if you have any specific examples from Google or other parts of industry, would be happy to hear those too.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think Google and I think many companies and governments are really kicking the tires on this technology to see what tasks it is good at. And the current state of the art in terms of LLMs and other AI systems are not great at every task, but we are finding for tasks that they are well suited, they offer significant advances. And so, I'll call out a couple. I think in terms of malware analysis, we have integrated LLMs into VirusTotal, which is kind of the world's largest repository of malicious files. It is outstripped human capacity at detecting whether a given file that's just unknown, you don't know what this file is, it can analyze it and tell you whether it's malicious or not with greater accuracy than a human can, a skilled human analyst. Vulnerability detection and vulnerability fixing. We're applying it to basically help us fuzz scan open source projects for vulnerabilities. And it's greatly improved our capacity for doing that. But you don't want to just create more bugs that humans can't fix. So we've also been looking at using LLMs to propose fixes to bugs that we're finding. And it's proving, I would say that the successes, I think we have a 15% success rate in terms of fixing sanitizer bugs, which sounds pretty modest, but at a company of Google's scale, that is saving thousands and thousands of engineering hours. And so we're finding it being useful in many areas. I think the other one that it's definitely worth mentioning, because I think it applies not just to software developers, but really any organization, is an incident response. And just being able to kind of like summarize and generate summaries of huge data sets of kind of threat intelligence and bug reports and things like that, summarizing this for an analyst so they don't have to comb through all of this data is proving really useful for us, and we suspect for many other organizations as well. And all of these things are very exciting in a vacuum, but what I think is potentially has the ability to be really transformative is having all of these specific use cases, but then in front of that, having kind of more generally capable language models that you can interact with in natural language that can then kind of start to tie all of these things together. And then you really start to get kind of a feedback loop and tying, threat detection with response in a way that will make organizations much more effective at cybersecurity.
Paul or Olivia, do you have anything to add to that? Maybe Olivia, if you have anything from, a national defense, national security perspective of how AI could be used in the field or things like that.
Sure. Yeah. So the Department of Defense is using AI in a variety of ways. For analyzing intelligence, for surveillance, for reconnaissance data, for operating autonomous weapon systems, predictive maintenance for weapons platforms, and then some routine business tasks. I think for cybersecurity in particular, a lot of this has already been mentioned, but enhanced threat detection, incident response, malware detection, and then authentication. I will say that the challenge becomes, and these issues have already been alluded to, but do we have the personnel or the workforce that's trained up and ready to actually operate these applications? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the data? And then do we have the money? Those are the things that are challenging, I think, the department's use and integration and accelerated adoption of these technologies that we're trying to work through.
Yeah, and I can add on that, moving away from the defense context, but I think that the lessons that Olivia mentioned are applicable throughout industry. I work with companies that are developing some of these sophisticated tools that are using them in their own operations, and that work with consumers or clients, customers that also need these capabilities. And I think if I can use the context of education as one, I think this is an area where schools across the country, and by the way, I work with a lot of companies that develop tools that are used in the K-12 context. But schools across the country are facing the same sorts of issues that the Department of Defense is facing. They don't have the personnel, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the funds that they need to incorporate some of these tools. And there is increasing adoption of AI in schools because they help to achieve different educational objectives, and we're working very closely to try to enable that progression. I think on the cyber security context, schools are facing the same sorts of challenges. They're facing ransomware attacks, they're facing phishing attacks, denial of service, kind of the basic things that we think about when we think about cybersecurity. And the challenge has always been one of funding and infrastructure. So I'm hopeful that some of the advancements in AI are going to bridge that gap, but it's still something that we have to work on through some very non-technical policy solutions.
I think a lot of the time when some new technology comes out, especially in the cybersecurity space, it like, there's like the letter X is like thrown around and like everything's like thrown, like seems like pricey and fancy and things like that. And so I guess one of the things that I enjoyed about like hearing from you guys is that the foundational elements of cybersecurity are what AI can help with. And so, I mean, if you're thinking from like an organization of not of Google size, maybe smaller, small business or a school district or a smaller government, thinking about how they can employ and leverage AI-enabled technology to help cybersecurity to free up resources to do other things. What are some considerations that these organizations should have in terms of how they could, everything from like how they could pitch AI to their C-suite to invest in, all the way into thinking about like how it would actually be deployed? We can start with Charlie.
Well, I think AI offers tremendous potential to both make humans more efficient, to upskill humans, people, and ultimately offload toilsome tasks that people shouldn't be doing at all. So I think what really excites us when it comes to cybersecurity is there's this notion now with AI that it's kind of the great equalizer, which is that it helps unskilled or lower skilled people more than it tends to help highly skilled people. I think offers huge potential for addressing some of the kind of cybersecurity skills shortage that is, I think, top of mind for a lot of policymakers. So in the way that that will play out is essentially AI and language models have the ability to take all of this data that companies like Google or Microsoft or different cybersecurity companies have, and translate that data into models that can allow any human to access this vast expertise in a very accessible way. And so whether that is a like the one IT professional or a small number of IT professionals in a school district where they may not be able to afford a cybersecurity person, but are able to interact with a language model that can give them advice on how to properly secure a network, I think offers tremendous potential. I don't have any specific advice for people in that position looking to adopt the technology, but I can just say that I think more and more in the future, these types of capabilities are going to be readily accessible and are going to get better and better at providing value to people who aren't necessarily starting out at some advanced level in cybersecurity.
Great. Paul, do you have anything to add?
I would say that we're seeing businesses of all sizes jump into AI. So it's I think the question is, how can we incorporate AI into what we're doing right now, rather than do we need to incorporate AI? But sometimes that's a really challenging question. I do think that there are, in many industries, a view that AI can help with readiness and help to simplify tasks and speed up tasks rather than replace workforce. And I know that's been a big concern. But in all the different industries we're working at, everyone's grappling with AI and how can it actually help us to do what we're trying to do better. And that is organizations in the financial sector and the healthcare sector, in technology, in digital publishing, in education. And I think that's really exciting because there is so much potential with these technologies. I think that what we're seeing in terms of cyber and companies that are kind of incorporating cyber tools is that a lot of the big cyber vendors out there are already using AI and machine learning and have been for some time. And so that is a natural progression. And I think that's great. There may just not be as much awareness of how these tools can actually help to address the concerns that are out there. And again, we get to the infrastructure challenges, including having the funding that is necessary to really incorporate the kinds of tools that you need to safeguard your environment.
Yeah, exactly. And, you lead off with you finish off with some of the challenges. And Olivia was also talking about the challenges of deploying that type of technology in a DoD or just even federal government context. Olivia, I want to ask you from like a legislative perspective. You've listed some of the challenges. Feel free to go over those again if you have more detail to share. But what are some of the ways that, that people can kind of help with that legislative process, whether it's to engage with policymakers or educate them more on specific, the specific benefits that AI can bring to cybersecurity, things like that?
Yeah. So one of the great things that's been going on over the past year or so is that the majority leader has been leading these AI Insight forums with Senators Young, Rounds, and Heinrich. And they've brought in a number of stakeholders from a variety of industry sectors to talk about just that, where the technology is going, what the risks may be, what different safeguards or guardrails we should be thinking about, and how we should approach legislation. I think that work is ongoing. There are a number of committees who have their own specific interests in how artificial intelligence is impacting what's under their jurisdiction, as do we. And so I think continued engagement with us is certainly welcome, particularly during this period of time as we're meeting with stakeholders to prepare the National Defense Authorization Act. I think one of the things, though, or many of the things that we hear a lot about, again, are the personnel shortages. And I'm glad, Paul, that you've mentioned so much about where there are opportunities for training. I think also about existing DoD personnel. Is there a curriculum available right now for them to understand, this is what this means to have this component inserted into a weapons platform? Do they understand what this is actually going to mean for the weapons platform and how they're going to have to operate it? So those are kind of some of the things that we're thinking about. And so again, continued engagement between now and when the bill closes is certainly a welcome thing.
To go back to some of the cybersecurity applications of AI, Charlie, I wanted to ask or start with you in terms of whether you think that there is enough availability of accurate threat data that could drive cybersecurity-driven AI.
I think so, but we need kind of the policies and partnerships in place to benefit, the largest possible set of organizations and people. This is one of the areas that I get really excited about for AI's impact on digital security, because I think defenders have a lot of disadvantages in kind of that are almost inherent from the way that the internet was built. But one advantage that I think the cybersecurity community actually has is the data. I think the defensive community benefits from a broader data set than attackers do. I think when you look at large technology companies, governments, cybersecurity companies, even academic data sets, there is a huge wealth of data to drive cyber defenses. And the exciting thing about AI is, it's basically the purpose of it is to turn data into useful software, and by building better and better models. And of course, attackers have access to data sets as well, but in general, they have to operate in the shadows, and they can't share data the way that different groups of defenders can. And so if we can work together and pool data sets to train better and better models for companies and for defenders, that offers a lot of advantages. And so when I hear about, for instance, the U.S. AI executive order has a provision on releasing public data sets that are currently held by the government, and releasing them to the community to build better models with. I would love to see that applied to cybersecurity. Of course, I know when it comes to classified threat data, there may be sensitivities there. But in general, finding ways to share data sets amongst different organizations to both pre-train models and train models and fine-tune models, I think it could be really transformative for the community. But we have to work together to get there.
To zoom back a little bit about what you were saying in terms of, you were kind of alluding that data was siloed, and typically I think my experience with it is that specific vendors hold on to specific data because their systems and programs are running on those networks. And then you have the governments who all have their own proprietary networks and things like that too. Could you expand a little bit more on the data sharing problem as it exists today in cybersecurity?
Sure. I mean, the cybersecurity community has had, I would say, somewhat of a mania for information sharing over the last, 1 to 2 decades, where, we will see kind of over and over new information sharing initiatives pop up that, at their core is this kind of thesis that if we are sharing data about threats we are seeing, threats to one organization, can often metastasize, and that threat actor is going to target other organizations as well. So the closer we can get to sharing that type of information in real time with other organizations allows the whole community to benefit. Now, there has certainly been kind of silos, and I would say the biggest silo is within government, as probably they probably holds the biggest and most sensitive data sets, but industry has their own silos as well. I actually do think in the past 3 to 5 years we've seen probably the best progress in developing more and more effective information sharing channels, and we've seen different government initiatives spring up that have improved things. And so I think if we can build on that and share data, not just to plug a single IP address into some system, but to actually share more to plug it into model training, that's going to have a lot of benefit for organizations.
It seems like something where AI can kind of help streamline that too, hopefully.
Definitely.
Paul?
And if I could just add on that, I think that Charlie's really hit on one of the linchpins in realizing the potential of AI, which is data, and data sharing, and leaving the cyber context aside for now. I think that has been one of maybe 2 or 3 real issues that we need to address. It's going to be kind of a continual process of addressing to do more with AI, which is being able to have access to robust data sets and share those data sets. And I think that that's important to for a variety of different uses that we have in AI. And there's some government initiatives right now that would call for creating public data sets, opening public data sets to researchers and companies and so forth. And I think that is really where we need to see policymakers focus. My sense is that on the cybersecurity side, there's been more robust sharing of data. Charlie is the expert there about how far we've actually succeeded through initiatives of CISA and Cybercom and so forth. But I think that's really the key. Our AI systems are going to be more effective. They're going to be able to do more things if we have access to more data. And there are silos and there's regulatory restrictions that make it difficult to share data across organizations. And sometimes those restrictions are applied more strictly than maybe they need to be. But I think that this is something that we should really be focused on.
I'll just add, I agree with everything that's been said. This is an issue that the Department of Defense, I think, is very well aware of, and they're actively working in coordination with us as they're trying to put systems together that are interoperable between and among the services, is to share the data. Do they have everyone? There's a lot of data. There's tons of data, but can we make sure it gets to everybody? Because that is actually what's going to get you the best kind of decision advantage and superiority and all the benefits that we're talking about. Because it means nothing if one service had something and they're keeping it in their corner and they're not sharing it with somebody else. So it's something that's top of mind for us and the Department of Defense, and we're continuing to work to address this challenge.
Great. I want to turn to some of the kind of future AI applications and benefits. But before that, I want to remind our audience, if they do have any questions, you can feel free to use the Q&A option on the Zoom chat, and then we'll turn to your questions after this. All right, so I wanted to also see, where we talked about kind of the existing applications, the existing challenges. I want to look more into the future now and see where we could see AI-enabled cybersecurity tools advanced in the next 5 to 10 years. Charlie, why don't I start with you?
Well, frankly, I think it's really hard to know just at the rate of change we're seeing. But there are things that we are excited for and making kind of strategic investments to see how we can develop the technology. I think vulnerability discovery is a big area of focus. I think one of the kind of most noteworthy kind of public-private initiatives that has sprung up in the last year is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is sponsoring a new AI cyber challenge, which is going to be looking at how can we use AI technologies to find vulnerabilities in commonly or widely used open source projects. And you can think about open source has this challenge where it's oftentimes maintained by very few people who are all doing it for free basically, and it's a tough task to keep these projects up to date and secure. And if we can apply AI to that challenge, pairing the human maintainers with systems that are able to automatically find kind of the most risky bugs and vulnerabilities in those projects in order to fix them before attackers get to them, it could potentially be revolutionary for the industry. I think there are still major challenges in terms of, LLMs can find bugs in code, but finding bugs that are truly exploitable is a tougher task. And so we have to see if the technology can advance to find real signal rather than just create a lot of noise. It can certainly find a lot of bugs, but it doesn't ultimately matter if it's not finding the right types of bugs. So I think but there's a lot of potential there. I think there's a lot of potential in safe coding. I think one of the things that concerns me a little bit is we're seeing LLMs used to help developers write code, but it's not necessarily helping developers write secure code. And so if we can train LLMs to increasingly fine-tune code gen models to write more secure code than humans are able to do, I think that will address a lot of the vulnerability in our world. And then finally, I think what's really on the kind of like frontier of research that we have to absolutely get right is using agents increasingly. Basically AI agents, or some people call it like agentic systems, that are able to basically act in accordance with our guidelines, but act with less supervision than systems today. And that's where you'd really get these productivity gains in helping organizations that may not even have a single IT professional, let alone a single cybersecurity professional. AI systems that can perform these tasks to defend organizations has potentially transformative value. Of course, we're going to have to work really closely on kind of guardrails around that technology to make sure that they have effective oversight and auditability, and that they're acting kind of in accordance with our principles. But is potentially, again, very transformative.
Olivia?
Yeah, so really appreciate what Charlie said. As I'm thinking about this in the context of cybersecurity, where would we be in 5 to 10 years? My hope is that we'll be able to have real-time responses and threat predictions from any kind of artificial intelligence technologies. Another area where we've focused some of our time is in the post-quantum cryptography era. To what extent can AI help us be prepared for that? And I would love to see it be the answer to some of our concerns about that timeline. But that's really where I hope to see a lot of progress, because it's a threat that we are actively thinking about how to accelerate our preparation for and address when I think it's 2035 is when we expect that date to hit.
Well,
Lots of good points. The only one I would put on top is of what was said is I think we're going to see more privacy enhancing technologies incorporated kind of at the get-go into various technologies, and there's a number of PETs that incorporate machine learning technologies to help preserve privacy and protect personal information. And I think this is going to become more fundamental in the design of software going forward, which will help to protect information and ensure privacy and so forth. Which I think is a component of a holistic cybersecurity solution.
since you all are in kind of like the public policy sphere, I also wanted to ask all of you, in terms of thinking about long-term strategic changes or like digital transformations that we would need to be able to integrate AI into national cybersecurity defense. What are kind of the steps that we need to be thinking about today so that we're prepared 5, 10 years down the line when a lot of these technologies are implemented at scale, or you have new technologies coming and changing the nature of the game? Charlie, why don't I go to you first?
I'm happy to start. So I think there's two things that are really key. First is, we think about it from a platform perspective. It is vital that the most widely used platforms are integrating AI to keep the users of those platforms safe, kind of out of the box. I don't think we need to be in a future where a school district needs to be, purchasing kind of fancy AI solutions and kind of managing lots of products there. If we can be, shaping the platform, so think about like the actual computers, laptops, mobile phones, browsers, these kind of foundational, fundamental technologies. If AI is baked in there, it's going to drive a lot of the safety and security gains for the planet. And so making sure we're getting kind of that fundamental tech policy right. And I think building on what I think the US government's national cyber strategy has been, which is about the largest software vendors need to embrace kind of the security outcomes of their users. And so I think we can use AI in that way. to help improve security for the people that are using these platforms. The second way to think about it is, ensuring for those organizations that need it, particularly in critical infrastructure and public sector, ensuring that they have good pathways to adoption. And that's where I think we get more into this kind of like balanced approach to governance, where we need to make sure that we are managing the risks. And I still think there's a lot of work to do there. But we have to set as our vision that, not only should, a high risk use case like critical infrastructure, not only should they be using AI, it's almost mandatory that they should be using AI because attackers are going to be using it as well. And so we need to make sure we have kind of policies and kind of a balanced governance approach that can, increasingly promote the on-ramping of this technology, which they're going to need. So I think that's kind of a, two prongs that I think will get us to a place in the future where we can have a society and a, defense apparatus that is competitive.
Yeah, I would say, Charlie, you kind of took the words out of my mouth, with especially DoD's Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, as they're kind of leading the way to make sure we have the infrastructure, or the scaffolding, as they call it, that's necessary to integrate AI. Do we have the platforms? Do we have the apps and services? Do we have the training data? Do we have the models? They're really responsible for putting all of that together. And I think through policy, we can help make sure that they have the resources, the authorities, the personnel, among other things that they need to put that in place. And then by working with other components like the Defense Innovation Unit to make sure that technology is integrated and that there is a competitive environment for it to thrive, that's just another important element to this entire equation.
Yeah, what Olivia and Charlie both pointed to is the need for the public and private sectors to work together. And I think that that's more critical today than at any time in recent history. So much of our digital infrastructure is maintained by private entities, non-governmental entities, and what we consider to be national security has really expanded. Critical infrastructure is definitely part of our national security. The trust and safety and reliability of the online environment is part of our national security. And so I think we really need to, through policy, pursue more collaboration between the public and private sectors in this country.
Do either Olivia or Charlie have anything else to add from like a government or regulatory body approach? I feel like I just inferred from Paul saying that there should be greater collaboration between government and industry. I don't know if either of you have the same take, a different take.
The same. I fortunately work with a member who wants to hear from stakeholders in the private sector and elsewhere to make sure he has all the information he needs about what's going on in the marketplace to help inform the legislative process. So I agree with Paul completely.
I agree as well. I think there are some things that the U.S. in particular should look at, and I know is looking at. I think one challenge the U.S. government faces is the process to adopt cloud services is rather slow. I think there are just and specifically I'm talking about FedRAMP. There are tens of thousands of cloud services on the market. And I think to date, over the last decade, only roughly 300 to 350 cloud services have ever been approved for use in the federal government. I bring this up because the majority, if not the vast majority, of AI solutions are delivered via cloud. And so if we don't have effective pathways to adopt cloud services, we're also not going to have good pathways to adopt AI services either. I think the US government has recognized this. I think we've seen OMB has released kind of a new direction from FedRAMP that I think gets the balance right. But it is a continued challenge that I think is leading to delays in adoption of AI in the public sector. That I think we have to kind of work together to make sure that we're getting the technology into the hands of the people who need it most.
Awesome. So I want to conclude before we turn it over to Q&A. If our audience could remember just one thing from our webinar today, what would you want it to be? And I'll start with Olivia.
Okay, so this isn't very novel, but in the National Security Commission on AI, one of its recommendations was to embrace competition in AI. And I really think for me, sitting on SASC in the national security space, it kind of captures exactly what we need to be focused on, um, moving quickly with adoption, moving quickly with our investments, moving quickly with working with the private sector to make sure our military service men and women have the technologies they need to maintain decision advantage on the battlefield for enduring national security. So that's where I'm focused, embracing competition in AI.
All right, Paul.
Great, thank you. I think that's a great comment. I worked on the NSCAI, and I fully support that approach. And I think it ties into now I see things much more from the kind of the private sector side, but I think it's really important that we embrace innovation. I think steps that are being taken to ensure the safety, security, reliability, trustworthiness of AI are essential. They're also essential to United States competitiveness. We want to be a leader in all of these things in responsible AI, but it's very important for us to continue to promote innovation. Otherwise, we won't continue to be a leader. And that goes as well for the cybersecurity context. So I guess the one takeaway would be this, public and private really working together on a shared mission. I think that's really essential for our country.
All right,
So
Charlie.
I have the unenviable task of going last, and I can either, just kind of like regurgitate and reiterate the excellent points that Olivia and Paul already raised, or say something that maybe wouldn't be my top takeaway, but still important. And I guess I'll do the latter, which is, we haven't focused on it too much in the discussion, but I made this point up front that AI is software, and it's even as it can sometimes seem like magic, and it has us thinking about these kind of like long tail risk future scenarios, we still need to do all the things that we do for conventional software in terms of cybersecurity and cyber hygiene. And so, sometimes the debate can skew towards maybe the more sexy end of the spectrum. But it is really, really important to keep that conversation balanced and keep focusing on the fundamentals of cybersecurity that we've learned from kind of decades of experience.
I think one of the takeaways I got is that if you're either interested in cybersecurity or AI, there are a lot of jobs for you, and it's not too late for your career change. So there's lots of opportunities abound, both on the innovation side and then how to work on controlling, I guess, the ramifications of that innovation. So we'll turn over to Q&A right now. We have a very good intro question, which is, what does a cybersecurity attack look like? I guess we kind of just broad brush stroked over, cybersecurity and how AI can help it. But, I think there are many ways, Kevin, that a cybersecurity attack could manifest itself. I guess maybe if we have any examples from maybe an AI context, or if maybe Charlie or Paul want to explain just like a basic kind of cyber attack.
I'll defer to Charlie on this one.
Thanks, Paul. At the end of the day, when we think about cybersecurity, there's kind of three objectives, three things we're trying to protect: the confidentiality of our data, the integrity of our data, so not letting a bad actor change that data, and the availability of the data. Obviously, the systems need to be online and work for them to provide any value. So, the attack really depends on what the attacker's objective looks like. If they're looking for confidentiality, they may look to, enter a malicious command into a search box on a website in order to trick the backend database to give you all the information. I mean, that's a classic kind of attacker technique. If you're interested in taking down a system, we talk a lot about denial of service attacks, where you could just flood a website with so much traffic that the website kind of can't take any more traffic and essentially is shut down. And so I know, Kevin, you haven't specifically asked what AI has to do with any of that. But we can look at AI's use to conduct such attacks. So could you have an AI system that can perform a denial of service attack, send so many requests to a website that it kind of falls over? I would say yes, you certainly can. You could also have cybersecurity attacks on AI systems, and that's where we talk about some of the more novel things that are lots of research papers being published, like things like prompt injection attacks. So you have a chatbot, and you give the chatbot a command or some instructions that causes it to forget about the rules it's been programmed with. If it's been programmed with don't help a user build some sort of weapon. If you conduct a prompt injection attack, it can kind of bypass those guardrails and help a user, construct a weapon. And so those are types of attacks we're now grappling with, trying to develop good defenses for.
And then I'll also add one more thing too, in terms of generative AI and the ability to use the language tools to be able to craft like social engineering tactics. So in terms of like writing phishing emails, if you say like, hey, read up on this profile of this executive and write a convincing letter for them to wire me or wire this account X amount of money. And so, there are other ways that AI can intersect with cybersecurity without, it being a specific cybersecurity attack per se, but as an avenue to lead into some other type of fraud or cybersecurity attack. One other question we have is, I wonder how AI hackers face a cybersecurity system where accessing data in the system needs to verify a user's real identity. The user's identity information is stored in a chip which nobody can access and is updated in real time. I guess it's whether you can use AI to hack a system that no one can access. I would say no, but I will defer to our other experts here.
I think it's a little hard for me to follow the question, but if like your identity was stored in some sort of trusted hardware, like a hardware security module, trusted execution environment, in general, that would make the system more secure from any attack, whether that's an AI attack or otherwise. And an attacker might look at things like getting physical access to the device to maybe help facilitate access to that. But I think without more kind of detail on that, I'm not entirely sure how to answer.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up with one last question. Are there any risks to organizations who fail to adopt some element of AI? If, like in the future, whether it be for cybersecurity specifically or, in general?
Well, I can start. I think on the cyber side, if you're not using AI, your protections may not stay as current as they need to, because I think one of the advantages of AI-enabled cyber tools is that they are constantly updating, and the predictions are better, should be getting better over time. So I think that you're seeing ML and AI more generally used in lots of cyber tools today. It's not static.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that applies directly to the national security space. I think it's essential that the military be engaged on artificial intelligence, and not doing so would really put us in a bad way when we look at our competitors abroad.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And, but I would also say, I hope we want to live in a world where AI can also help, people, consumers, organizations that are not sophisticated. And I think we're actually already there, although there's always more to do. If you are a Gmail user, you're benefiting from AI defenses. If you're a Chrome user, you're benefiting from AI defenses. And so continuing to bake this technology into these basic platforms can take us a long way. But if you're a large organization that is perhaps like a juicy target for hackers, you need to do even more than that. And that's where I think you're going to need to see AI investment to keep up with hackers who are going to be using AI to try to target you.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. Very insightful discussion. I feel like we could keep going. Thank you to Brandon, our policy director, Heyman, our events team. Really glad our audience was able to join us today. And check out and stay tuned to the working group, as we'll have many more events and publications for all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.